When the werewolf attacked you and bit your leg,
Oh, sick goblins!
it released a small stream of... You've got the polio, Frank. Does my cack still work?
So, it turns out that Abraham Lincoln wasn't the only American president who battled the supernatural. The Axis powers were actually werewolves, and as such could only be stopped by a badass. A badass who happens to be American, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The film opens with pre-President Roosevelt becoming a national star for single-handedly killing a werewolf. He's bitten during the fight, and because in this universe werewolf bites don't do something sensible like turn you into a werewolf, but instead spread polio, he's confined to a wheelchair. He becomes president, defeats an Axis plot to turn America into a nation of werewolves by way of illegal alcohol imports, and finally brings America into World War II, where he decides that the US Army isn't really needed because he can kill all the enemy himself. Warning, this might not be the most historically accurate film ever made. If I had to compare this movie to anything, it'd probably be Team America World Police. It's extremely over the top, silly, ridiculous, and definitely has a certain insane charm to it, especially when Barry Bostwick's on screen. He's a great FDR, full of bravado, frequently pissed, and constantly vulgar.
Motherfucker! I'm a motorcycle of death. I ain't got no sidecar.
Does my cack still work?
How in the world are we going to storm the beaches of Normandy, take down an entire army of werewolves, and still make it to a French titty bar? Our last call. I just want you to know, if anything happens to me, take care of my mistress. Well, yeah, I have a spare key for the Lincoln bedroom underneath the mat, but you might want to change the sheets first, though. What? Somebody die? Oh, yeah! Mussolini and Hitler, I capped those bitches.
Was für ein Kerl.
What a guy indeed. Although, as weird as this sounds, this is not the most badass Barry Bostwick's ever been on screen. And no, I'm not thinking about this.
What's this? Let's see. I feel sexy. What's come over me? Whoa, here it comes again.
He played arch-heretic Thodin in the first episode of Lex. A rebel leader resplendent in his pink sparkly battle miniskirt who committed acts of revolutionary violence via an insectoid robot bomb hidden up his nose, and reacted to facing down an immortal and invulnerable super assassin by tearing out his own eye and using it as a smoke bomb.
My life means nothing in the great equation.
Beauty such as yours must live on.
Listen, I'm just saying, if Bostwick's FDR and Thodin teamed up, they'd have to nuke 2 or 3 continents in order to stop them. Anyway, back to FDR, American Badass. Whether you like this movie or not, it comes down to your taste in comedy. And it wasn't quite what I'm looking for. Comedy's obviously subjective, so this might be perfect for you. For me, I prefer comedy when actors are being serious and the situation is ridiculous. A good example of this is an Airplane. At times this was done in FDR American Badass, but often the acting adds silly little extra things to try and get extra laughs, which kind of ruins the jokes for me. For instance, having FDR scream, "Fuck polio!" and then shotgun a werewolf is fine, but him doing a silly little bob and weave when fighting one isn't. But like I said, comedy is subjective. You might love this. The budget is either tiny or they deliberately went with tiny budget chic. And frankly, it's a bit weird seeing so many recognizable actors in such a clearly tiny budgeted movie. Out of the smaller parts, Ray Wise as Douglas MacArthur in particular stands out. Unlike pretty much every other actor, he never strays from the serious performance regardless of how ridiculous what's going on is. So naturally, I loved him the most.
We're the United States government. Anything's legal.
Fuck yeah.
Now, Sir Winston Churchill.
You guys are drinking. And during a time like this, Jesus, honestly, had I known this, I would have come earlier.
The guy who played Churchill was the worst guy playing him I've ever seen. He made Ian McNeese's caricature in Doctor Who look like a clone of the guy. At least Ian McNeese had an English accent. Luckily, all Churchill really does is turn up and drink, so it's not a massive deal. There are a couple of very weird choices in this movie that I really don't understand. And no, I'm not talking about the stoner ghost of Abraham Lincoln being played by Kevin Sorbo. It's how the film treats Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, this movie is so utterly juvenile and tasteless that Jimmy Carter's uncle will try to prostitute his wife at least once per scene he's in, and yet they ignore the very real possibility that Eleanor Roosevelt was a lesbian, or at least bisexual. I really don't understand flat-out inventing shit when reality could be mined just as easily. For most of the movie, Eleanor and FDR don't have sex, but that's not because of her being a lesbian, but because she's turned off by his tiny, shriveled, shaking polio legs. But after FDR single-handedly storms Normandy, kills all the Nazis, and somehow makes it across the Atlantic in his wheelchair while covered in the blood of his enemies, she finally relents and is going to fuck him. There's even the slight insinuation that this is what finally kills FDR. They could have had Eleanor being a lesbian, refusing sex with FDR, and maybe have them both fucking the same White House intern. Because FDR has an affair with an intern because Eleanor won't fuck him. So when FDR comes back from the war, Eleanor's finally overcome by his Nazi-killing amazingness and fucks him. Maybe in a three-way with the intern. Yes, it's pretty stupid, but it fits with the rest of the movie. Another thing like that was the fact that Churchill once had a short meeting with FDR while naked. They could have had Churchill be drunk and naked in his scenes, or just randomly strip off partway through. You might think that'd make the movie worse, but the guy playing Churchill is so bad that's frankly impossible. One of the subtle-ish things that amused me was the fact that Japan was treated as a joke by Germany and Italy. Now, I grew up with shows like Allo Allo, where if any Axis power is treated like a joke by the others, it's always Italy. So having it be Japan for once was a fun change of pace. Not really sure why Mussolini is A, thin, and B, black, though. I realise it sounds like I didn't think much of the film, but that's only part right. It's just easier to quantify what's wrong with it over what's right with it. It's a bit like Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter in that it is a title, concept, and trailer that it just cannot live up to. It's better than Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, though, except for that bit with the atheists. That's one of the best things ever. I honestly did enjoy this for the most part. It's just that the mind-blowingly cool Red Band trailer couldn't ever be equalled by the film itself. Watch the trailer and you've pretty much seen every quotable line, every fun part, every big laugh, and that's a pity. But it's way better than Churchill the Hollywood Years, which really reminds me of it. And overall, I'm glad I watched it. I hope this does well enough to justify sequels. Maybe something to do with Jimmy Carter, because his uncle was a supporting character in this. Use the backdrop of the oil crisis and the Tehran hostage crisis. The Iranians are, I don't know, aliens, and made both crises happen because of reasons. Meaning Jimmy Carter, who's basically Mr. Rogers, if Mr. Rogers would kill you while being polite, has to stop them. He goes to their alien planet and saves the day, but while he's away, his old school and college rival Ronald Reagan becomes president and Jimmy Carter becomes a children's television presenter. A la Mr. Rogers. Yeah, the idea that the Iranians are aliens is bad, but it's perfectly in line with this movie having every single German, Italian, and Japanese person be a werewolf. Here's another suggestion for a sequel. Obama and his family go to a cabin in the woods and need to take on zombie voodoo economists. Basically turn this political cartoon into a movie, as literally as possible. I want to see Obama say groovy. Now this'll never happen, but guys who made this, if you watch this, then feel free to use those ideas for sequels. Just give me a cameo. Or at least get Brad Jones to play Obama. He is from Illinois. You can buy this movie on Amazon. It's not that expensive. It's not great, but it's well worth the cost. That was a Nanoview. It was small and imperfectly formed, but hopefully you heard about a new movie.